Hello, Pre-Algebra. Today we are going to be looking at Chapter 1, Part 9, and this is going to be other grouping symbols. So if you don't have the worksheet out in front of you, pause the video, go find your guided notes. You might have to pull it up on Teams if you don't have it, and let's try the bell ringer together. So here we are just going to review PEMDAS, so I like to write it down every time I do it. And P stands for parentheses. So do you see any in step 1 or number 1? So I see parentheses, but it's just the -2. We can't simplify that any further. So I'm just going to cross out the P. But I do see exponents. So I'm going to underline what I'm doing and write everything else down below on the next line. So I bring down my -5, my multiplying by 3, and my adding 12. Now I'm going to do a little side problem to figure out exactly what -2 cubed is. So remember, the exponent tells us how many bases we multiply by. So in this case, my base is -2 because it's in parentheses, and I'm multiplying it by itself 3 times. So I have 1 base, 2 bases, 3 bases. So a -2 multiplied by a -2 is going to give me a +4 multiplied by my last -2, and that will give me a product of -8. So right below the -2 cubed, I will write a -8, and I have my -5 times 3 plus 12. So now we can cancel out our E. Now do you see any multiplying or dividing? I would like you to underline the multiplying. And let's bring everything else down. So -8 minus, I'm going to leave a space for my 5 times 3, plus 12. So if I simplify 5 times 3, I get 15. And I don't have any division, so I'm going to cancel out M and D. So now I have addition and subtraction, but remember they have equal strength or equal powers. So we have to do this left to right, just like you would read a book. So here I have a -8 minus a 15, and that is going to give me a -23. If you would prefer to see this as an addition problem, you can always keep change. So we keep that -8, we change to addition, and we change to the opposite. Opposite of a 15 is a -15. And I'm also going to bring down my plus 12 at the end. Now you might want to look at that reference sheet I made, and when we are adding numbers where one is a negative and one is a positive, we need to find the difference in the values first. So the difference between the values would be an 11. Now which one is the larger number if we're ignoring the signs? Well, 23 is bigger than 12, and because 23 is negative, my answer also has to be negative. So I would like you to try the bell ringer question number 2 on your own. Pause the video, and whenever you have an answer, I would like you to play back and see if you get the same thing as I. I got a difference of -15. So pause that, review that example, and when you're ready, play back, and we'll go where it says nested parentheses. Now here it says parentheses located on the first blank. I would like you to write inside. Parentheses located inside other parentheses. Write that down as well. Now I have some hints here for you, and it says do the innermost parentheses first. And we're going to do an example where I explain that in a minute. And then we have to follow something when you are inside the parentheses. So think back, what would tell us the order in which we have to do our operations? PEMDAS. PEMDAS tells us exactly what order we do all of our operations in. So we want to do the innermost parentheses first, and then follow PEMDAS again when we're inside those parentheses. Now, some of you are already familiar with brackets from last year, but if you're not, they look like this. They almost look like parentheses, but instead of a curve, it's a little bit of a square or a sharp edge. But they act the exact same way a parenthesis would. So let's try example 1 together. Do you see how in the hint it said do the innermost parentheses first? So if we look, I see brackets and I also see parentheses. So we want to do that innermost parentheses first, and I'm going to highlight that. That would be the inner parenthesis outside or inside of the brackets. So let's simplify that first. What is 2 cubed? And I can again do a side problem. The exponent 3 tells us how many bases we need to multiply, so I need 3 2's. 1, 2, 3 of them. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. If I multiply that by 1 more 2, I'm going to get a product of 8. So in this case, I want to write 8 minus 9. And because I haven't finished, they're going to stay in parentheses. I'm going to bring everything else straight down. So I bring my 6 down, my adding symbol, the -4, and I'm going to write my brackets in blue. And then my minus sign and also the 30 out in front. So now we are not done with the parentheses inside the bracket, so we have to continue to simplify that. So I'm going to say 8 minus 9, or 8 plus a -9, if you want to do keep, change, is a -1. So again, I'm going to bring everything else down. 30 minus a -4 plus 6 multiplied by a -1. Now what would PEMDAS tell you to do? Well, I know that I have parentheses here where it says -1, but I can't simplify that value anymore. But I know brackets act just like parentheses. So I should probably do that next. So let's take on the -4 plus 6 multiplied by a -1. Well, 6 multiplied by a -1 is going to give us a -6. And then when I add a -4 to that, I get a -10. So if we keep going, I see a minus sign right up next to a negative sign. So put your hands out like we do in class. 2 negatives or a minus right up next to a negative sign cancel each other and make a what? A positive. So this is going to equal 30 plus 10, which is going to give us a sum of 40. And I apologize, my stylus isn't working very well. It's a little bit spotty sometimes. So now we can work on example 2, and it says to evaluate. That just means to simplify. So if we see here, we have parentheses and we also have exponents. What does PEMDAS tell us to do first? So I'm going to work inside the parentheses, but I see a minus sign again right up next to a negative. So that is actually the same thing as saying 8 plus 2, or 10. So I have a -1 cubed, or you could say -1 to the third power, that's fine as well, multiplied by a 10. So now let's do a little side problem. What is -1 cubed? So I know my exponent 3 tells me how many bases I need, and my base is -1. So -1 times -1 times -1. So let's work left to right just like we read a book. A -1 multiplied by another -1 gives us a +1. Those two negatives canceled. But now I have to multiply that by this last -1 here. What would the product there be? A +1 multiplied by a -1 is going to give us a -1. So we can write that directly under -1 cubed. And I can bring down my multiplying by 10 step to get my final product of -10. And while you're working on this lesson, if you want that reference guide where it lays out all of the rules for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing integers that are both negative and positive, you can definitely look at that while you're doing this lesson to help you. All right, let's try this first team huddle question, and I'm going to help you out with this. I know a lot of you are probably looking at that fraction and thinking that it's very overwhelming at first, but let's just write out PEMDAS first and see what we have to do. So I'm going to use my highlighter just to show every step that we should do first. So do you see any parentheses? You should be able to see that there are brackets and parentheses inside those brackets. So remember, that little hint on the front page said do the innermost parentheses first, which would be this set of parentheses right here. So let's write everything down that we're not using. 41 minus our bracket. We have 10 divided by 2. And we are adding 3 to that, and I'm just going to leave a set of parentheses there and then just close off my bracket in the end. Now what would a 2 plus 4 negatives give you? That would give me a sum of a -2. Now I still have parentheses, so I'm still on this P step of PEMDAS. So now I can do this entire set of brackets because they act exactly like parentheses would. So I'm going to, again, bring down everything else I'm not using so far, 41 and the minus sign, and I will write my bracket, and we can evaluate this. 10 divided by 2 is 5, plus, what is a 3 multiplied by a -2? Well, that is going to give us a -6. So now again, we are still on that parentheses stage because we're still working with our brackets. So again, I'm going to bring down that 41 and the minus sign, and I'll have my bracket there. And we can again evaluate the inside of that bracket. If I had 5 positives and I'm adding 6 negatives to that, think about a number line. Where would you land? If you started at a 5 and you added 6 negatives to that, where would you land on the number line? You would be at a -1. Now, I don't see any exponents. We're done with our brackets. We've simplified it to a single digit. I don't see any multiplying or dividing, but we do have some adding and subtracting we can look at. I automatically see a minus sign right up next to a negative sign. So if we do keep, change, this actually turns into 41 plus 1, which gives us a total sum of 42. So you might want to pause that video and just keep looking at that work until it sets in a little bit. And then when you're ready, you can move on to this multiple choice question. So it says simplify, or just find the answer, and show all the work, then circle your final answer. And I actually gave you some choices here at the bottom. So let's write out PEMDAS first. And I would like you to see if you can do this problem on your own. So pause the video now. When you think you've completed it, play the video back and see if your answer is the same as mine. Remember that 2 cubed is not 2 times 3. Remember, it is 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2. So we have 3 bases there. My answer was C, 11. So here I would like you to pause the video, check over my work, make sure that it looks exactly like yours on your guided notes worksheet, and when you're ready, you can move on. So here we have the word fraction bar. Now this says a fraction bar acts like 2 pairs of parentheses by grouping. So write grouping on the line, please. By grouping items in the numerator and denominator. Now, if you forget what the numerator and denominator are, you might want to draw a set of parentheses and write top for numerator and then bottom for denominator. Then divide. So write divide on that last line for me. Now the hints I have at the bottom that are circled, I would like you to write this. Simplify the numerator simplify the denominator then divide last. I'm sorry, my O does not look like a O. All right, let's look at example 3. Evaluate the expression 6t plus a negative 3, all divided by 5t plus 10. But I gave you something when t is equal to a negative 3. So step 1, we want to substitute in what for the numerator? So in the top numerator, I see a t. So we're going to substitute our t value, -3. Then we can simplify. So let's do that work off to the side. 6, instead of writing t, we write the value of t in parentheses, which is -3. And we are going to be adding a -3 to that. Divided by, let's look at step 2. Substitute blank into the denominator. Well, again, I see 5 being multiplied by t, but I know t is equal to a -3. So I'm going to substitute in -3 into the denominator and then simplify. So let's do that. 5 multiplied by a -3, and we're going to add 10 to that, just like our example shows. So in step 1 and 2, the only thing we did so far was replaced or substituted our -3s in anytime we saw a t. Now step 3 says, put the numerator and denominator together using a fraction bar and divide. So let's go back and let's simplify this. A 6 multiplied by a -3 is going to give us a -18 plus -3 at the end, divided by 5 multiplied by a -3 gives us -15, and we are adding 10 to that. So I simplified it a little bit, but we can still keep going. So in the numerator, if I had 18 negatives plus 3 more negatives, how many negatives would I have in total? 21 negatives. Now in the denominator, I have 15 negatives, but I'm only adding 10 positives to that. So how many negatives would I have left over? I would still have 5 negatives. But if you notice, on your reference guide, I have the directions for when you are dividing a negative divided by a negative. What happens to those? They cancel out and become a positive. So this is actually equal to a positive 21 divided by 5. So if we look here at step 3, it says after putting the numerator and denominator together using a fraction bar, we have to divide. So you can use a phone calculator or you can use the calculator on your laptop the school gave you, but I'll just show you that 21 divided by 5 is going to give you a 4 1/5. And I found that out by taking 21 divided by 5 in that order in a calculator. So I would like you to attempt the team huddle parts A and part B, please. When you are done with your work, play this video back, but pause me now until you have both of those questions completed. For part A, I had 2 times 9 after I simplified 3 plus 6. In the denominator, I simplified 6 minus 5 to get 1. After multiplying that by a 6, I got a denominator of 6. And the numerator, after simplifying 2 times 9, I had a numerator of 18. When I divided 18 divided by 6, I got a quotient of 3. This one's tricky. All I did here was simplified the fraction, negative 16 divided by 4, to get us a negative 4. And then everything else stayed the same in the denominator. But let's keep going. Two plus a negative 4 is going to give me a negative 2. And what is an 18 divided by a negative 2? A negative 9. But I see a minus sign right up next to another negative. So that would make this equal to 9 plus 9, or 18. So pause the video, check that answer out. Make sure you have that written down in your guided notes, and then let's keep on going. Now on the last page, we have example 4, and it says to evaluate the expression in parentheses s minus r multiplied by r plus s divided by t. Now I gave you these though. R is equal to 3, s is equal to 2, and t is equal to negative 5. So if we follow these steps, first we are going to be substituting in each number for the corresponding variable. So you might not know what that means, but it just means that anytime we see an R, we're going to replace it with a 3. Anytime we see an S, we're going to replace it with a 2. And anytime we see a T, we're going to replace it with a negative 5. So take a minute and do step 1, please. Once you are done there, it says step 2, simplify the parentheses out front first. So that is just what PEMDAS tells us to do, parentheses first. If I have 2 and I'm subtracting 3 from that, what do I get? A negative 1. Then I'm going to write everything else the exact same way it is. So multiplied by 3 plus 2 divided by a negative 5. So now I would like to keep going. We have step 3, simplify the numerator. So I'm going to, I am going to highlight that, not draw over it. 3 plus 2 is 5, so we bring everything else down, that negative 1 multiplied by our 5, and we're still dividing that by a negative 5. So far we have done step 1, step 2, we've done step 3. Now time to do step 4. Divide the numerator by the denominator. So we're just simplifying that fraction. Negative 1 multiplied by, what is 5 divided by a negative 5? That is going to give me a negative 1. And our last step here is to multiply. A negative 1 multiplied by a negative 1 is going to give us an answer of positive 1 here. And 2 negatives canceled out because we were multiplying them together. So I would like you to try Team Huddle questions 1 and 2. If you need help, play the video and I can do it along with you. If not, pause the video, see if you can do it on your own. Then play back the video when you're ready. First step, remember you can always look at example 4 and just follow all of those steps. So first you want to substitute, and then you want to simplify any parentheses if there are any, and just keep going through PEMDAS. It will tell you exactly what to do in what order. So here I had B multiplied by C, and in the denominator I had my A minus the D variable. So first I just I substituted all of my values in for the variables, and I simplified then my numerator, 9 times 2, which gave me 18, and then simplified my denominator, 7 minus 5, giving us a positive 2. Lastly, I divided, and 18 divided by 2 gives us a positive 9 quotient. Now let's try number 2. So in this one, I have my 3 times x minus my z value, and here in blue, I actually wrote the numerator out for you so that you could directly see underneath in pink what those values were. Now in the denominator here, I have a negative w, and some of you may have just wrote the negative 1. But if you look, it's a negative w, but w was equal to a negative 1 already. So do you clearly see where I have my negative and then my w value, negative 1? Make sure it's written exactly like I have it in pink. The blue is just to show you exactly how I substituted those in. Now let's evaluate the numerator. 3 times 6 gives me an 18. And if I do keep change, or see that that's a double negative, it turns into a positive, plus 2. Same thing in the denominator. I see a double negative side by side. So put your hands up. What happens to those two negatives? They cancel out and become a 1. So we still have to simplify the numerator here, which gives us a positive 20. But 20 over 1 is just a fancy form of saying what number? 20. All right, class, this is the end of today's lesson on 1.9. This is the last lesson of Chapter 1, so we will be having our Chapter 1 test next week. Now, for pre-algebra, it's going to be different if you're in the A group or in the B group. Now, tentatively, I think that if you are in the A group, you're most likely going to be taking your test on Tuesday or Wednesday after reviewing for 2 to 3 days. And then if you're in the B group, it would be the day after that. So I'm thinking maybe Wednesday or Thursday. So please, this weekend, make sure you are studying your Chapter 1 content. If you have to watch my videos and refresh a little bit on some of those sections that we learned this chapter, please do so. Group A, you should be watching this on Friday for your off day. And Group B, you will be watching this on your off day on Monday. So thank you for watching. Your homework tonight is also posted on Teams. It is just the section 1.9 homework sheet. It's just a few problems, so try that out. And the next day you physically see me, you'll be turning that in. All right, thanks guys.